Hey guys, Matt Wilson again. I'm doing two videos today because I fell behind. I just finished my video on Fleetwood Mac, moving right on into Paul Simon and, Simon and Garfunkel and Paul Simon in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I should just say the 20th century. So it's not the biggest catalog in the world, so I should be able to do this in a decent time, not have one of these things that just goes on forever. Let's start. Simon and Garfunkel were one of the preeminent folk rock bands in the 60s. This is a nice little set I had for a while. This is just these are remastered CDs of the core studio LPs. I like it, but what I'm really going to show you is this. This is better. This is everything. This is the albums on CD. This is the greatest hits album with the live tracks on CD. It's all the live albums. It's fairly cheap too. I don't remember what I paid for this, but it certainly wasn't $100 or anything. So let's start with that. Nice little booklet, Okay. 1964. Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Simon and Garfunkel. Pretty good record. A folk album, really. Although it's, when I make these claims, this is a folk album. Certainly these guys were folkies. But real folk albums in the early 60s were comprised of folk artists, doing older material that they did not write. That is the essence of folk music, folks. To take to take songs that were done previous generations, even 100 or so years ago, and put them forward to a modern audience. So Paul Simon was always more ambitious than that. This is this is a lot of his material. Some of the stuff's pretty good on here, but it's folk in that I don't believe that there's any electric instrumentation on here. I did not play the album before I started the show. I know it pretty well though. They did it. It was put out. It of course had Sounds of Silence on it, which has become a standard, but it didn't make a great impact at the time. To the point that the duo, Paul and Artie, who had been friends since the 1950s, pretty much broke up. Paul went to England. Oh my God. Every episode I forget one album. Paul went to England. He did an album over there called the Paul Simon Songbook in 1965. It's pretty good too. I don't have it. I mean, I have it, but it's not here on this table. It also did not make much of an impact over there, but the songs on there are great. It includes, that album, the Paul Simon Songbook, has lots of songs on there that they would re-record for their 1966 Sounds of Silence album. So let me just get right to that. But first, to continue the story, well, this is the album, by the way. Their producer, I want to say it was Tom Johnston, right? The African-American producer that they had, took that Sounds of Silence folk song from their first album. In the advent of the Byrds and folk rock becoming a thing, he put drums, and I hope that's not drums on the original version, an electric guitar, made it sound kind of like a Byrds song, overdubbed it with other musicians, put it out there, boom, it's a hit. Paul Simon had no idea that he had done this, that Tom had done this. The song's a hit. This is in 65 now, right? They call up Artie, hey, you're getting back with Paul. You're going to be Simon and Garfunkel again. Let's get in the studio. Let's do some more material to capitalize on the success of this 45. So they do that. They don't have a lot of material. Paul, never the most prolific of songwriters. So they took a lot of songs that were on the Paul Simon Songbook, and voila, you have a classic 1966 folk rock LP. God, I don't know why I even bother. I'll just look at the... Okay. Sounds of Silence is the first, the new electrified 45 mix, is the first song on there. Leaves That Are Green is great. Blessed. These are Paul Simon songs, folks. Kathy's song, beautiful. Somewhere They Can't Find Me, not a song you see reproduced a lot on Simon & Garfunkel compilations. Angie, the Davy Graham number, which Paul does exactly the same as Davy Graham. Richard Cory, which has been covered by lots of artists. Paul McCartney did it. A Most Peculiar Man, April Come She Will. Boy, is that beautiful? Who was writing songs like that? We Got a Groovy Thing Going, which is, you might think of as being filler, but I mean, Paul actually, obviously liked that word groovy. He used it in more than one song title. And the classic I Am a Rock. This might be a good time to say that the mono mixes of these Simon & Garfunkel albums are not, to my knowledge, on CD. I think Paul doesn't like them or something, but I would love to have them. I'm pining for them, as a phrase I've used in the past. This is a classic folk rock album, guys. But perhaps even better is that same year's Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. Now, he's not plundering the Paul Simon songbook so much on here. Although if memory serves, there isn't. I wish I had that CD, folks, to show you guys. I could tell you exactly what they took from that. But you can look it up online. That's no big deal. This is stunning. I mean, Sounds of Silence was a classic. This is what? More of a classic? This album doesn't get enough credit. What's on here? Scarborough Fair, Canonical, beautiful. He's using them, he didn't write all that, but they arranged it. Patterns is a really good kind of deep cut. So is Cloudy. Homeward Bound is a classic. I mean, these songs were standards when I was growing up. The Big Bright Green, Pleasure Machine, is kind of filler, but I think that they even used that for one scene in the Graduate. 59th Street Bridge Song, Feeling Groovy, that's another classic. I think Harper's Bazaar had the hit though with that, didn't they? Doesn't matter. This is the definitive one. Dangling Conversation, that was a top 40 hit, and it's not on their greatest hits album. Flowers Never Bend with the Rainfall, beautiful. The Simple, Desultory, Philippic, or How Was Robert McNamara Into Submission, you might consider that to be filler, but I like it. Family, Wherever I May Find Her, whenever they would let Artie just sing a song solo, he really has the best voice. I mean, Paul Simon can sing like an angel, but Art Garfunkel is like a cut above, A Poem on the Underground Wall is all right, and 7 o'clock, he's just reciting, that's the news, he's Silent Night. It's another classic, guys. I'll tell you, their work in 1966 was so strong, it's almost comparable to Bob Dylan. Dylan, of course, wins out, and I'll tell you why. A friend and I were syncing this album within the last few months, and we also synced that same night Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home, and this light bulb came on over my head, and I thought, Paul Simon really wants you to like his music. He pretties it up. He has these little nice sweet sounds that he gets in the studio, and they got the harmony vocals, and he's really presenting his music in the best way possible. These songs are designed to be hits. This is designed to make money. Dylan doesn't care. Dylan is was awe-inspiringly talented that he just said, I'm just going to write my songs. I'm not going to practice them too many times. I'm going to get some guys to play behind me that I like. We're going to go in the studio. We're going to bash them out, and then I'm going to move on to the next project. He's not going to do a lot of overdubbing. He's not going to care about the finished product in as much as it clearly represents what he wants to say. Paul Simon was writing music at this time for radio consumption, for popularity. Dylan is just writing them to get him out there because he knows he's off to the next thing as soon as you like it, you like it. You don't, you don't. But man, these Simon & Garfunkel songs were made to last, weren't they? In 67, you have The Graduate. Well, the movie is 67. Was this album in 68? I don't remember. It's one of those 2 years. The movie for sure is 67. This album uses previously released Simon & Garfunkel songs with some other stuff that he and R.D. were messing around with. For instance, I gotta look at the track listings again. Sounds of Silence is on there again. In fact, there's more than one version of the Sounds of Silence on here. You also have Dave Grusin tracks on here, so that not every song is from. I guess I should hold this up. From Paul and Art. Scarborough Fair Canonical, you know that one. April Come She Will. Mrs. Robinson, that's it. There's not even a complete version of that song on here. You don't get the complete version of Mrs. Robinson until the Bookends album. But this record sold like hotcakes. I think it sold more than any other Simon & Garfunkel album before this. The film was a phenomenon. And suddenly, Simon & Garfunkel, who had been stars since, I guess, late 65, when the Sounds of Silence was a hit 45, were now superstars in 67 into 68. So, that led us right to Bookends, which somewhere I've got a Mo Fidelity disc of, but that's fine. I'm not searching for all these things anymore. It's just aggravating. Bookends is considered by many to be their best album. Is it better than either of the two 66 records? Yeah, probably. But those are perfect in their own way too. Bookends, though, it's virtually flawless. If you've never heard a Simon & Garfunkel record and you want to move past like a compilation, I might start with Bookends. The Bookends theme is great. America is among the best songs that they ever did. Old Friends is a great track that also is not on the Greatest Hits album. Bookends theme again. Fakin' It, one of their best known songs, not on the Greatest Hits album. Punky's Dilemma is good. Mrs. Robinson, finally you get the full-length version of that. Hazy Shade of Winter, another classic Simon & Garfunkel song, not on the Greatest Hits album. And At the Zoo, ditto. So the Greatest Hits album did not utilize Bookends to the degree that it could have. Matt, why do you keep bringing up the Greatest Hits album? I'm going to tell you when I get to it. All right. Bookends, that's for sure a 5-star record. I would say both Sounds of Silence and Parsley Sage are 5-star records, but this is an even better 5-star record. All right, guys. No one was making folk rock this commercial, this eternal in 1968. Okay, no new Simon & Garfunkel album in 1969, but we had this in 1970, Bridge Over Troubled Water. This was the best-selling Simon & Garfunkel record at the time. Maybe did I read somewhere this was the top-selling album of 1970? I don't remember now. Maybe at one time it was. I don't know if it still is. It's another album more or less like Bookends, where like every song is essential. You get the classic Bridge Over Troubled Water song, which Art Garfunkel sang, perhaps the most well-known Paul Simon composition, you know. El Condor Pasa, that's a classic. Cecilia's a classic. Keep the Customer Satisfied is a great deep cut. I say deep cut because I don't hear those songs on the radio, and they weren't on the Greatest Hits album. So Long, Frank Lloyd Wright, ditto, another great deep cut. The classic Boxer, which was a hit 45 and 69, I think. Baby Driver, which they just did a movie with that title a few years ago. Only Living Boy in New York is another great deep cut. Why Don't You Write Me? I think Paul's thinking about R.D. when he's saying that. A so-so version of the Everly Brothers' Bye Bye Love. If there's any filler track on this album, that's probably it. And Song for the Asking is beautiful. So, Bridge Over Troubled Water is another 5-star record. Folks, that's, to my ears, 4 5-star records in a row. Not too many bands, solo artists, duo artists can make that claim. All right? Okay. In 1972, we had the Greatest Hits album, which I've mentioned several times. This was, I think, the top-selling Simon & Garfunkel record. I think more than Bridge Over Troubled Water. when I was growing up, this was the only one I didn't have it. My parents had it. You get live versions of some of these songs, which at the time never bothered me. It wasn't until sometime later when I began to buy these records, I thought, wow, I had forgotten that there's supposed to be a studio version of this number because I was so used to hearing this record. This at the time was like perfect. Now, if I was going to make myself, well, I wouldn't make it for myself. If I was going to make a Simon & Garfunkel compilation, I would use all the songs that are on here, but I would use the studio versions. In fact, folks, if I really wanted to make one that was definitive, I'd use the 45 mixes, the mono mixes, which I don't think you can even get on CD. So this will do, though. This is one of the, awesome greatest hits records of that era of the 1970s. And I'm glad that in this box set they included it. Okay, over the years there have been any number, I've got 4 here, of Simon & Garfunkel live albums. I'll do this one first because it was released in real time. They got back together in the early 80s. I want to say it was 82, maybe 81. They did a concert in Central Park. It's good. I mean, it was a free concert. Well, look at that shot. That's a lot of people, right? The popularity of Simon & Garfunkel never really dwindled in the 1970s. Paul had his ongoing solo career. Art was making solo albums. But this is pretty good. I'm gonna go over the songs with you guys. What do you got here? What made this cool was that you had the obvious Simon & Garfunkel songs, but you had Paul Simon solo songs too, which now you can hear what they may have sounded like had they been sung by Simon & Garfunkel and not just Paul Simon. You had Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, So Crazy After All These Years, American Tune, Late in the Evening, Slip Sliding Away. There's a lot of them. Kodachrome, and they go into Maybelline, the Chuck Berry number. 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Wow, there's a lot of them. So that's what was cool about this at the time. The album sold well. They must have really not gotten along to resist the temptation to get back together, because Artie was always content to sing the songs that Paul wrote anyway. So I guess for Paul to have, I guess he was pissed off because Artie went and did Catch 22 and Paul was in the studio doing Bridge on Troubled Water, and he wanted Art to come back and help him out with the album or whatever. Anyways, I'm not going to get behind all that stuff. All right, there has been 3 Simon & Garfunkel records released posthumously live. We'll go over these really quickly. This is live in 67. All right, in fact, guys, I'm gonna do them all because I don't want this video to go on. This is live in 69. This one is, I think this one's primarily acoustic. This one they're branching out and having a band, play behind them. They have gotten together, periodically, or maybe only one time, I don't remember. This is live on stage. This is 2 CDs. You know what? Just really quickly, because I want to tell you guys when that one was released. I think that was the late 90s or the early 2000s. Here it is, live on stage. 2004? Wow. Okay. They're noticeably older, their voices, but it's 2 discs. This must have been really great shows. So many songs on here to choose from. Again, not just Simon & Garfunkel songs, but there's not that many Paul Simon songs. That's funny. I like all of these records, and if you get that box set, you get all this stuff. It's cheap too. So, what are you doing? Drop what you're doing, pick this stuff up. Okay, I'm gonna leave Simon & Garfunkel behind to discuss Paul Simon, and I'm going for ease now in these videos. This is the box that I'm going to use for this. This is Paul Simon, the studio recordings. It does not have his 1974 live Ryman album, which I've never even heard, to be honest with you guys. So I'm going to use that. There's no booklet, I don't think. Nope, it's just the CDs, so it's expected that you already know these albums, which I did. The first one he did in 1972, Paul Simon, still to my ears. Oh, you know what? Each individual CDs have booklets. Is still one of the best ones. It was weird. I can assume I was only 7 years old when this came out, hearing him without art. But you know, there were songs that right, that just Paul Simon sang on the Simon and Garfunkel records, where Artie's not around to provide harmony. But this is such a listen. Mother and Child Reunion. That's a classic. Duncan's a great song. I remember Run That Body Down. Me and Julio down by the schoolyard. That's another classic. Hobo's Blues, Paranoia Blues. This is one of his. I remember Robert Christgau, the rock critic, gave this like an A or an A minus. Then again, he's, I think, the guy that posits that Paul Simon solo records are better than Simon and Garfunkel albums. I don't think so. Like I said, they did 4 5-star records in a row. This, I don't know if I'm going to say this is 5-star, but it's close. This is nearly a classic, I think. So there you go. Paul Simon, 1972, a fine continuation. Same year as Simon and Garfunkel's greatest hits. This, I'm going to say, is my fave, or at least it's my fave from the 70s. There Goes Ryman Simon. Okay. I can just look at these song titles. American Tune is one of his classics, been covered by lots of artists. Something So Right is really good. Loves Me Like a Rock. That's any big hit that Paul Simon had in the 70s is pretty much a classic to my ears. Take Me to the Mardi Gras is good. I think that's all the, Kodachrome. I think that's all the hits. But cut for cut, this is as solid a record as he made. I'm going to say if he made a 5-star album in the 70s, this is it. All right, one could wonder what these songs would have sounded like with Art Garfunkel on there. Not something that I'm thinking of when I hear the Paul Simon album, but I am thinking about it here. Get it. There Goes Ryman Simon. If you want to get a Paul Simon album, not a compilation. Almost as good is So Crazy After All These Years. I've got a low fidelity version, which I wasn't going to look for because I don't need to. I mean, I'm showing you guys what these look like with this box set. This is almost as good. All right? These are all wonderfully recorded. He was a studio guy, if nothing else. So Crazy After All These Years is a great one. My Little Town, he recorded that with Art Garfunkel, so it's another Simon and Garfunkel song. It's a hit, which you usually don't see on Simon and Garfunkel compilations because it's under the Paul Simon banner. But great song, which was a hit. I Do It For Love is good. 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. What a way to start off the album with those first few songs. Gone at Last. This is probably his second best album. Although, you know what? I really like Paul Simon too. I'm going to say these first 3 albums are the best Paul Simon solo records until you get to Graceland, which we'll get to in a few minutes. All right? One wonders what these records would have sounded like with Art Garfunkel, but they're wonderful records regardless. All right? Okay. Like I said, this box does not have 1974's live Ryman album. I've never heard it, so can't talk about that. There was a greatest hits album in 77 with, was it Slip Sliding Away on it? I think it had a hit on it. Nothing from Paul until 1980. He's got a wig on here. He lost some weight. He's an actor in the One Trick Pony movie, which it's out there. You can see it. Lou Reed even has a little bit in there. This, though, is the first average Paul Simon album. You would think after being gone, not writing songs for an album for 5 years, he'd have come back with something better than this. It's not bad, but it's average. Late in the Evening that's a classic. The rest of this album, Ace in the Hole. Yeah, you know what? A lot of these songs aren't even bringing back any memory. So disappointing. Better, and then after this, he gets back with Art for the live concert in Central Park, which sold a lot. Hearts and Bones is a better record. Hearts and Bones, he's with Carrie Fisher here. They're married. Their union wouldn't last. There are no hits on this record. The first Paul Simon album with Garfunkel, where there's no hits. You can say there were no hits on the Paul Simon songbook in '65, but some of those songs became hits later on. This would have nothing like that. His stock had fallen by this time to where, a new Paul Simon album was not a guaranteed success. Having said that, it's a strong set of songs, though. Definitely a better album. This is '83, I want to say. Definitely a better album than One Trick Pony. So you want a great Paul Simon record without any famous songs? This is it. All right? Hearts and Bones. Okay. A few years go by. Again, we're now in 1986. Graceland. This is his comeback record. This was his most successful album, I think. Guys, I got to be honest with you. I love this. I know that not everyone digs this, and he's exploiting those African musicians. All right, he always he's like David Byrne or someone. He really likes African rhythms, or I mean, go back to El Condor Pasa. That's not African, of course, but he likes music from other cultures. There's stories that I want to say Steve Berlin of Los Lobos put out there on the internet that the track on here with Los Lobos, Paul just stole it, took the music that they were jamming in the studio and put his name on there. And you know what? I don't know. I don't doubt it. Why would he tell that story and not, if it wasn't true? I still love the album though. I mean, these songs, I played this to death when it was out. Even my mom liked it. So I've got fond memories of that. I could play it around her, and she didn't enjoy too much of my music. Boy in the Bubble, Graceland, that, to me, that's a classic. Willie Nelson covered that and did it well. I Know What I Know, Gumboots, Diamonds on the Soles of Your Shoes. You Can Call Me Al was the hit. Under African Skies. I like all these songs. I'm not even going to say them anymore. This is a 5-star record to me. I know that I differ with a lot of people in that regard, but, guys, I'd rather like something than not like it. Okay, so that's '86. No other records for the rest of the decade. It means he only made 3 albums in the '80s. He would make less in the '90s. He'd make 2. Okay, this is kind of a companion piece to Graceland. This is Rhythm of the Saints. It's not as good. Certainly, there are not as many famous songs. But you play this album a lot, it will grow on you. I remember being I saw him live at this time too, Simon fan at the time, and thinking he was the most consistent artist from the 1960s. Now, it helps his case at this point in 1990 that he hadn't released too many albums, right? So, a guy like Bob Dylan or Lou Reed, who just cranked them out, Neil Young, is going to have, not as good of a hit to miss ratio. But Paul Simon also knew when to release an album and when not to. He was kind of like Robert Fripp in that manner. Fripp would always break up King Crimson if he thought that they were past the sell-by date. And then he would just reform the band a few years later with some of the same players or, whatever, and do it again. I love this album. It's virtually a 5-star record to me. Love it. All right. Another one I have fond memories of. My family liked it. I loved it. Since I'm only doing Paul Simon in the 20th century in here, I'll stop with this Songs from the Cape, man. This box also has You Are the One. It's pretty good. Actually, it's better than this. I'm not going to talk about this, though, because this is the last one. I just want to do Paul Simon in the 20th century. This one was a disappointment. This is my least favorite Paul Simon record. Not even as good as One Trick Pony. He's making a concept album here about a guy who murdered people, but then he went to jail and he was rehabilitated and yada, yada, yada. You know, very bleeding heart liberal stuff. And I'm a liberal. I mean, I get it, but I could not get behind this album, not just for the, you know, thematic quality of the subject matter. The songs didn't really do it for me. Now, yes, I will admit to you, I didn't play this album a whole lot. In fact, I never owned it before this box set came out. But when I heard all these songs all these albums in the box, I think I only played this 1 or 2 times. Perhaps I should return to it, you know. Anyway, Songs from the Cape, man. I want to say it's 97. My least favorite 20th century Paul Simon record. Okay, guys, I'm having a good time. Another video I did today that's not that long, 31 minutes. I'm going to sign off before it gets to 32. Paul Simon, whom I regard as a genius, or at least he certainly once was. Love the guy. Hope you do too. Bye-bye.